a little bit of a weird day. So I'm pretty sure I said in one of my early videos, early being like not this one, but one before that, that I wasn't gonna do anything gluten-free or vegan or vegetarian intentionally. I'm totally gonna reverse that right now. So I'm holding a Bob's Red Mill product, and if you've never heard of them, they make really good flours, grains, all sorts of stuff. Their products are a little bit more expensive than, you know, like your regular run-of-the-mill stuff. Get it, mill, Bob's Red Mill, run-of-the-mill, flour mill. But I celebrated a birthday this past week and I wanted to bake something to bring into the office. And then I realized I couldn't do that because one of my coworkers who's in the office every day is gluten-free. So I was gonna challenge myself to making a gluten-free something with the intention of bringing it in the office this coming week. So I decided to go gluten-free banana bread. Reason for that is I've had gluten-free products before and they've all been kind of dry and kind of weird. So I'm hoping that this being, you know, a gluten-free product, one-to-one baking flour, so it already has like the other stuff in there like xanthan gum to keep it from sticking. But I'm hoping that with that and the help of like a ton of eggs and a ton of bananas, that we can make something that's not super dry, but still super gluten-free. So we're gonna try this. I have no idea how it's gonna go, but let's see. Let me bring you over here. Let's talk ingredients for a quick second. So we have our gluten-free baking flour, which I already mentioned. We have baking soda, salt, 4 eggs, 4 of them. We'll have sugar, applesauce. The applesauce that I have available to me is not unsweetened applesauce. It's in fact Trader Joe's cinnamon applesauce. So I'll be cutting back on some of the sugar and probably adding some more cinnamon because I like that in my banana bread. We also have vegetable oil in lieu of canola oil. I usually have canola oil, but we have 2 things of vegetable oil right now. So got to get through that first. Vanilla extract and 5 bananas, right? So you can tell some of them were hanging out in the freezer and they have now gotten mostly de-thawed and defrosted. And then I have one other one that's just hanging out because I don't want to stick it in the freezer, but I do want to use it in this recipe. So we have all of those. And then we've got our pans. And in fact, funny enough, I have canola oil cooking spray. But this recipe should yield 2 loaves. So here are my 2 loaf pans and we'll see how this goes. So with any baking recipe, you're gonna have 2 bowls typically. Occasionally you'll see a couple on Pinterest where it's like, hey, I did this all in 1 bowl. But typically what you want is a smaller bowl for your wet ingredients, a larger one for your dry ingredients. You combine your dry ingredients, give them a good whisk so that they're all stirred together. And then in your smaller bowl is gonna be where you prepare all of your wet ingredients. Your eggs, your banana, your applesauce, oil, and vanilla. And oddly enough, this is where your sugar is going into. So you're gonna stir that together and then eventually add that in to the middle of your dry ingredients. It sounds really weird, but in order to like stir it, combine it, mix it together, it completely makes sense. So I'm gonna start with the bananas, which are kind of gross. Off to the side, I have my plate still sitting over here next to my bowl. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna peel them. They're gonna be kind of gross and slimy. But I'm gonna peel them and drop just the contents that I wanna use into the bowl. So that's what you guys are gonna see. Off to the side is gonna be my banana carnage grossness. And hopefully I can do this without it being everywhere. Okay, so there's 1 banana looking really nice. And then we'll have another one come in. So like I mentioned before, this recipe requires a lot of bananas, and I'm really happy that I found it because we've got a lot of bananas to use. And I'm always looking for more recipes that use more bananas. Typically you'll find a lot of them that are like, use 2 medium bananas. And I'm like, what about if I have like 12 large bananas? How's that gonna work? Not well, obviously. Okay, so there's all my slimy and frozen bananas. The one that I'm gonna add in last here is the one that hasn't hung out in the freezer. It's just a fresh one that was sitting on the counter, but it's also pushing ready for, you know, banana bread. So I'm gonna take out all the stringy thingies there too. And go ahead and plop that one in as well. Usually I would use all frozen ones. This one is obviously not frozen, but that's okay. In with our bananas, we're gonna add the 4 eggs that hopefully I didn't just crack on the counter. So as I'm adding these eggs, I'm also just tossing the shells over in my banana trash pile. There we go. I'm usually pretty good about not getting shells in here, and of course, as I say that, I'm looking at a shell. So here's what we do. We take our egg and we carefully use it as a spoon to get the shells out. Like I said, I'm usually pretty good about not getting the shells in there. Every once in a while I screw up. Let's see. 2 more. Last one. There we go. So that's all our eggs and bananas. In this bowl, we got our eggs, our bananas. The next thing that I want to add is the applesauce, just because it's convenient. So you saw my applesauce earlier. It's like one of the little packs that you would get to like put in a kid's lunch. This is what I have available to me, so this is what we're using. And I think, if we look at this, this is about half a cup. Like I said, the recipe that I'm following uses about a half a cup of unsweetened applesauce. This is sweetened and it does have cinnamon in it, and I am totally okay with that. So I'm gonna just dump that in. But I will say, instead of adding a full cup of sugar like the recipe calls for, I'm going to add a little bit less just to make up for it there. So let me get my, speaking of sugar, let's go ahead and add that as well. So it calls for a cup of sugar. Like I said, we do have the applesauce in there that does have some sugar already. So I'm gonna add just under a cup, reduce the amount of sugar that we have going into the whole thing. And yes, sugar was supposed to go in there. Sugar is one of the dry ingredients that gets mixed with our wet ingredients typically. Seems really strange, but I promise it makes sense. Lots of recipes do that. So we've got oil and vanilla that are left to go into this bowl. So in our bowl next, we're gonna do the vegetable oil in lieu of canola oil, because that's what I have. We need 1/3 a cup, so off to the side I'm gonna measure 1/3 of a cup. If for whatever reason you didn't have enough, or if you didn't have any applesauce, you would go ahead and increase the amount of oil that you're adding. Typically you'll see too in recipes that call for eggs, and people are trying to either make them egg free or reduce the amount of eggs. You'll see they add applesauce. So in this recipe, it's really interesting to me that we have 4 eggs and applesauce, because some ingredients or some recipes call for ingredients like applesauce as that caking ingredient to hold everything together. So there's an alternative there too. Last but not least, we're gonna do a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I don't want to measure it, but I'm going to just for the sake of the video. So here is a teaspoon and here is the vanilla extract, and there we go. I don't have a problem with vanilla flavor, so I'm always okay with adding more. but I understand some people don't like that. So I have all my ingredients together. This is just, I guess, a personal choice to start with the wet stuff. We're gonna add later our large bowl and put the flour, the baking soda, and the salt, all of our dry ingredients, but I wanna go ahead and mix this and get this good to go. Because I have bananas in there, I wanna make sure that I mash those as I'm mixing my ingredients. You can mash the bananas before you put everything in here. It doesn't really matter. You just wanna get everything good combined. You wanna break the eggs up, break the bananas up, and keep moving. So I would say this is the lazy way to do this, by like mixing and mashing at the same time. So I'm using a banana masher or potato masher. I would recommend something other than this plastic one. I'm pretty sure this one was $1, which is why I have it. My parents growing up at least had a metal one that kind of looked like a zigzaggy grate thing, and that one was pretty nice too. This one gets the job done, but I would say that it's not the best, and it's particularly a pain to clean it, but that's okay. So we're getting this mashed and mixed at the same time. Like I said, we've got to mix our dry ingredients together first. I would like to say that banana bread is pretty forgiving. So if you're looking for a place to start as far as baking is concerned, banana bread is pretty easy. The other thing that you can do with banana bread is add kind of, you know, secret flavor enhancers. So in this recipe, we already have vanilla in there, but you heard me mention that I like cinnamon, and I would put cinnamon in banana bread if I didn't already have it in the applesauce. You can also add lemon zest or orange zest into the bread to give it a different flavor, and that kind of pulls the vanilla flavors out. Not everyone likes that though. So I'm gonna opt for just kind of sticking with what I have. Like I said, I have a little bit of cinnamon in there from the applesauce. The other thing this recipe calls for that I am not going to do is add walnuts. So growing up in the South, we put pecans in a lot of things, and not so much walnuts. So most of my banana bread has pecans in it. I'm not gonna add the walnuts. It sounds like the walnuts aren't gonna be actually in the bread in this case. They're gonna be sprinkled on the top, but I'm not gonna do that either. So we're just gonna have plain, nut-free banana bread. So here's all of our wet ingredients, all well mixed. You want the bananas to kind of be a little bit chunky so that you can see them in the bread. Again, I guess that's a personal preference. If you wanted to just smash them down into nothing, you could do that as well. So I'm gonna set this aside for now. We're gonna work on our dry ingredients. And then once we're done with our dry ingredients, you'll see me add this into our dry ingredients. I'll start off by saying I am not a gluten-free recipe expert here, but the flour that I got hopefully takes into account and makes this a little bit foolproof because it is one-to-one baking flour. I did see some of the other options in the grocery store where you could have, you know, gluten-free cake flour or cake mixes. And there was other stuff, like I know xanthan gum is an anti-caking agent that was also available. I think I'm okay with this. So while I was talking there, I added 2 cups of the gluten-free one-to-one baking flour. And again, it's from Bob's Red Mill. They do a lot of stuff with flour and grains. And oddly enough, you can find some of their products both on the shelves next to the flour and in the like refrigerated section. So if you can't find it near the flour, check the refrigerated section because some of their products need to be refrigerated. So here's our flour. In with our flour, we're also going to add our salt and our baking soda. So baking soda, nothing super fancy, right? But we are going to add a teaspoon of it. I have the half teaspoon, so I'm gonna add 2 half teaspoons. If you hear tapping in the background, that's my oven heating up to 375 degrees, or sorry, 350 degrees, blah. So that was 2 half teaspoons, so 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And then for salt, You always wanna add salt to your baked goods. We're gonna use a 1/4 teaspoon, so I'm gonna do half of a half teaspoon so that I don't dirty more dishes. And I'm gonna whisk this around just to make sure that it's well combined. Okay, so done with my whisk there. This is where I always think it's good to have a wooden spoon. This one has a longer handle, which I really like, so that I can work up the spoon to stir the ingredients. One of the things that my dad taught me about making bread, particularly sweet breads or quick breads, as he would call this, is that you wanna like carve out a little hole in the middle and add your wet ingredients in there. This will help, and I think I did this with the pumpkin muffin recipe as well. This will help when you stir around the outside to combine those ingredients without over stirring them. You wanna stir everything until it's just moist, or you'll get like, I'm sure you've had like flat pancakes before that aren't really puffy, or flat, sad muffins or cupcakes. It's very similar. So most of that went in the middle. Obviously we've got a lot of wet ingredients going on here, so I didn't expect it all to be centered in that tiny little bucket. But now we're gonna go ahead and stir this. Kind of gently working around the outside, bringing the ingredients to the middle. And this is combining nicely. You'll see me also turn the bowl to kind of work the outsides to get the flour off of the sides here. And please let me know, like I said, I am not an expert on making things that are gluten-free. So if something in this recipe, for whatever reason, is a product that has gluten or is processed with gluten, please let me know. Like I said, I'm trying to make this so it would be acceptable for a coworker. I don't know the level of sensitivity that he has to gluten, but I wanna make sure that in the future, if I have people over, or like I said, I'm cooking to bring something into the office, that I know what would be appropriate for someone who has different ranges of gluten sensitivity. So I think we're coming up on almost mixed together. It is a little bit worrisome to me that I keep kind of revealing these pockets of flour. I think it's kind of shaken out a little bit now, so that's good. Yeah, that looks good. I'm not super concerned. I don't know if you guys can see this. Hopefully you can. There's a little bit of flour, like unmoistened, that's appearing. I was concerned about the bigger pockets. I'm less concerned about just like kind of the little streaks. That's okay. And yeah, now I'm not finding them at all. It's okay to have those little pockets, just like it's okay to have the chunks of banana. You don't want massive clumps. Like if the clump is big enough to like fit in your hand, that's not okay. But this is fine. This is the consistency that you want. If you start over stirring it, then you start having problems with just making it kind of cake together and break down in such a way that it would be kind of a flat and sad bread. So this is all the stirring that I'm gonna do. I'm gonna set this aside and I'm gonna spray our pans. I'll bring you over here. I'm gonna spray our pans. Obviously I can't do that and work the camera, and I'm concerned about getting canola oil all over the lens. So I'm gonna set you guys down here, and then when I come back to the counter, we're gonna have you set up so that we can pour this into there. All right, so I got my 2 pans sprayed all the way up the sides. So I'm gonna try to do them evenly. Don't know how that's gonna work. The other thing too to mention is these are brand new pans into my life. I got them for Christmas. The pan that I usually use is actually just one, and it has a little bit longer sides. These are just kind of rounded edges, so we'll have to see how this works. They also might bake a little bit differently because they're new. And maybe their non-stick is actually, you know, non-stickable. So I'm gonna start by pouring a little into each and hopefully not get it everywhere. I should also mention that these are, I think, 9x4 pans, and the recipe technically called for 8x4. You could do one big loaf. I'm following the recipe exactly. This is the first time that I'm making it. That may be a good decision, that may not be a good decision. I'm not entirely sure. But what I am really trying to do is make these two even. So they cook at the same time. I'll put them right next to each other in the oven. You'll see on my spoon here, I've covered some more flour that didn't really get mixed in. So usually what I would do is kind of go through here and like scrape out the sides. But because of that, and I don't want to have to, I don't want to have to add that in and then mix what's already in here. I'm gonna go ahead and stop. And I've made a mess, awesome. We've got 2 banana bread pans. They are hopefully gonna puff up a little bit. I've never cooked with gluten-free flour, so I'm hoping that they do kind of puff up because that's what I'm expecting. They're not gonna puff clear up to the top, but they are gonna get a little rounded. One of the other things too that my dad did when I was growing up was he would do 1.5 times the recipe and put it in a smaller tin so that it would get that over the top, like kind of muffin rounded portion that was sticking out of the pan. Like I said, these are not gonna do quite that effect, but if you wanted to, you could combine it into just one big loaf. You would obviously have to increase the cooking time. And typically with a bigger loaf like that, you're going in the oven well over an hour. These two should cook 45, 55 minutes, but we'll stick toothpicks in and check them. So I'm gonna move these into the oven, let you guys see how they're sitting in there, and then we wait. So I've never made this recipe before, but what I'm gonna do is show you guys how I have it in the oven. Oh yeah, it's also Valentine's Day / my birthday. So I have them sitting in the oven like this next to each other. I'm gonna go ahead and close that really quick, but hopefully you noticed they were towards the top. So setting the oven here. So you see we're at 350 degrees. I'm gonna put a timer on and I'm gonna set it for 45 minutes. That's the lowest amount of cook time in the recipe indicated that the bread would cook. So I'm gonna set it at that. It said it may go to 55. We'll see. But I wanted to make sure that I check the bread prior to that going off, just to make sure that everything's looking okay. I don't think that it'll be done at 45 minutes. I definitely think we'll have to go longer, but that's partly because I know my oven. But we'll see, and I'll check back in kind of maybe at halfway or towards the end of the timer, and then of course check in at the end when we're completely done. So we've got 15 minutes left. I was gonna crack this open and just kind of take a little peek. Ignore the potatoes, they are something else. So our bread's coming along quite nicely. I'm gonna go ahead and shut this and let them hang out a little bit longer, but I wanted to show you guys that I was checking in at 15 minutes. I'll probably bring you guys along to poke the bread in 15 minutes to see if we're close to done. We're at time. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do this without burning myself. Again, ignore the potatoes. They're just hanging out for our dinner tonight. So these look pretty good. They've got a pretty even consistency on them. I'm gonna poke them. That's pretty clean. Let me poke the other one really quick. Ooh. Yeah, these are actually looking good. So I'm kind of surprised that they look like they're done. I'm gonna go ahead and pull these and then we can take a picture when they're done. So surprise, it's the next morning, and I wrapped this up last night in foil, stuck it in the fridge. But interestingly enough, it looks like the bread, as it cooled, kind of collapsed on itself. It is a little bit puffy, and this is the puffier one of the loaf, but it's really small. which is kind of surprising to me that they had suggested in the recipe that you use 2 bread loaf pans and not 1. So here we are. I'm going to move it over to this cutting board, cut it, and give you guys a final look and do a little bit of a taste test because I think it's okay. It just looks a little weird. So I chopped up a couple of pieces of banana bread. I like that it has the big chunks of banana, which you see right there, but it feels very eggy, like really eggy. So I'm hoping, again, that it tastes really good. I'm hoping that there's just some different consistency that I didn't really expect, but sort of expected with the gluten-free flour, or the gluten-free baking mix, I should say. It wasn't just flour. So yeah, let me give it a taste and come back here. All right, so this is good. It's totally fine. It is pretty eggy. So if you like an eggy banana bread, this would probably be the way to go. But yeah, it's tasty, it's delicious. One thing I did want to mention and remind you guys in the video, I am not a gluten-free expert, which is why I said, in one of my initial videos that I would not be making, specifically vegan or vegetarian or gluten-free meals, because I don't have those dietary requirements, and so it's difficult for me to do all that research to figure out, did I accidentally put something that's gluten-free in this bread. So if you can help me out in the comments below, or what are your favorite recipes for making banana bread or other baked goods? Do you use Bob's Red Mill flour? Do you use his 1-to-1 baking mix? Or do you have other suggestions? Yeah, so please leave a comment and I will see you next time. Bye.